In the soundproof chambers far beneath the Palais des Nations, the presidency of the United Nations Planar Defense Council passed quietly into new hands. Mikhail Abakumov, whose tenure had defined the post-war containment era, stepped down. In his place, the council appointed Hafez Mousa, an Egyptian diplomat trained in law and human psychology, one of the few men to have witnessed both the collapse of empire and the birth of global governance. In the years following his appointment, President Hafez Mousa became a constant presence at the edges of the unknown. He traveled, quietly, without ceremony, to every point zero within reach. From the fractured glaciers of the Antarctic Circle to the burned salt plains of Central Asia, Mousa stood where breaches had once opened. He spoke with the men and women stationed there, the IRD operatives who faced the unknown at arm's length, and the CCD containers who bore the unspeakable weight of containment itself. Among them, he earned a title that would never appear in any official memorandum, the Father of the Field. He listened to what no one else did. He understood that silence, the mandatory silence imposed upon every operative, was not protection, but a wound left unspoken. And it was within that silence that Mousa began to see the fault in the Council's doctrine. Until then, UNPDC policy had been absolute. Every anomaly, every entity breaching the veil was to be neutralized. But the reports Mousa read and the people he listened to told a more complex story. Not every encounter ended in hostility. Some of the entities had spoken, sometimes in gestures, sometimes in languages the human ear was never meant to hear. From these accounts, Mousa drew a conclusion that would ignite fierce debate across the entire council. He argued that not all interdimensional entities were threats to be destroyed. Some were sentient, some were civilized, some perhaps were capable of reason. Communication, Mousa declared, must become the council's first response, not destruction. To many within the council, the proposal bordered on heresy. To others, especially those who had stood on the front lines of incursions, it was long overdue wisdom. And then, unexpectedly, his argument found support from a voice that carried enormous weight: Mikhail Abakumov, the council's former president. By then, Abakumov had taken his place within the Integrity Directorate, alongside Christoph Dahlin and Salman bin Samir al-Faqih, three men whose names were already bound to the Council's most secret archives. Their endorsement ended all resistance. And so, for the first time since its founding, the United Nations Planar Defense Council began to move away from the doctrine of annihilation and toward something altogether new and far more dangerous to its own foundations: the doctrine of diplomacy. To give this doctrine a human face, President Hafez Mousa selected 4 operatives from among the earliest recruits of Mikhail Abakumov's tenure. Each had been tested beyond human limits. Each carried the weight of silence, of memory, and of things witnessed beyond the known world. Their names, even within the council, were spoken in low tones, half admiration, half warning. The first was Stian Haugen, son of Olav Haugen, the scientist-explorer whose fateful 1939 Arctic expedition had unknowingly sown the very seeds of the Council itself. Gifted with a mind honed to dissect patterns, motives, and hidden truths, Stian became the Council's invisible watchman. Under the Contact Containment Division, he built networks of intelligence so intricate that even the world's most powerful security agencies remained blind to the existence of interdimensional breaches and to the UNPDC itself. The second was Inga Anderson, youngest daughter of Borg Anderson, another prominent figure of the 1939 expedition. A prodigy within the Anomaly Cipher Division, Inga possessed an eidetic memory that cataloged everything she encountered: the shape of symbols, the rhythm of encoded patterns, even the pulse of transmissions buried within noise. Her vision gave rise to the Hemispheric Observational Lattice System, or HOLS, a vast, interconnected web of sensors stretching across both hemispheres. Through it, the Council could detect and map patterns of incursion before they became disasters. The third was Lev Morozov, a name that, within the Soviet chapter, carried a gravity reserved for legends and martyrs. A master of arms and battlefield strategy, Morozov had risen through the chapter's incursion response division. Those who worked with him described his methods as swift, merciless, and unnervingly precise. Where others saw chaos, Morozov saw geometry, angles of approach, lines of failure, points of rupture. His tactics left no room for hesitation, no room for mercy. His loyalty to the Council's founding ideals, the defense of mankind at all costs, was absolute. The fourth bore a name that few outside the Thailand chapter could pronounce, Kemkong Yuthagarngam Torn. To his peers, he was known simply as Yim. The pride of the Thailand chapter's incursion response division, he possessed an awareness bordering on the supernatural. Elusive as smoke, he could not be stalked or even observed. In combat, Yim's perception was almost inhuman. He read his opponents as if they were sentences already written, every move anticipated, every strike preempted. He was easygoing by nature, quick to laugh, always smiling in the quiet between assignments. And yet, in action, he became something else entirely. Every part of his body was lethal. Even before insignia or recognition, in the initial implementation of Abakumov's training methods, the four were inseparable. Endurance trials that broke entire units only forged their resolve. They bled, suffered, and endured side by side, and from that crucible of exhaustion and silence, a bond was born. They were no longer recruits. They were comrades, friends. They had proven themselves in isolation, each a prodigy in their own field, each tested by the unseen wars fought beneath the veil of normalcy. But together, they became something else entirely. President Hafez Mousa himself presented them with insignia and a name. He called them the Arbiters. An independent task unit, unmoored from nation, allegiance, or chapter, they would move across borders, from breach to breach, from shadow to shadow. Their mandate was unlike any the Council had ever issued. Where others were trained to contain or destroy, the Arbiters were sent to speak. To stand between humanity and the unknowable, and to decide, through diplomacy if possible, through execution if necessary, what could be spared and what must be erased. They were granted access to every resource within the United Nations Planar Defense Council, every piece of technology, every archive, every corridor of power in the chapters across the world. Their authority extended beyond the field. They could conduct investigations, trials, and deliver verdicts independently, not only upon non-human entities, but upon operatives, regents, and even civilians, if their actions threatened the stability of the Council's purpose. The Arbiters answered to no one but the President of the UNPDC. Their actions were monitored only by the Integrity Directorate, a silent hand ensuring that their independence did not become heresy. Yet unlike the shadowed agents of the internal sanction enforcer, the Arbiters were not hidden. Their names, faces, and deeds were known to every chapter regent and operative across the Council's vast structure. For the first time in its history, the UNPDC had created something that resembled both conscience and sword, a living symbol of its new doctrine. And while the world above believed itself to be at peace, beneath its surface, words had become its most dangerous weapon.